Okay, folks, today we are entering into the first round of our first ever Real Raider Realist Reel Showdown. If you watched the first video in this series, you know that we're about to go toe-to-toe in a best of the best Christmas movie battle to determine who deserves to be the top of the proverbial Christmas tree. In this video, we're going to hack and slash our way through the first round and start making our first cuts in this tournament. But before we go too far, I want to make it clear that any movie that even made it onto this bracket, in my opinion, deserves to be in the upper echelon of Christmas films. So, if anything gets the axe in this first round, maybe you can find some solace in the fact that it was proudly considered to be one of the top options. Now, I'd like to also mention that any movie that wasn't included in this showdown may very well also be an all-time contender. I just couldn't fit them into these distinct four categories. So, we may touch on them later this year, or maybe next year. We'll see how things go. But, to begin our competition, let's take a look at the family movies. Our first pairing is Home Alone versus White Christmas. There's a lot to be said for either of these movies. White Christmas is an absolute classic, starring Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye as two war buddies who started a touring show. While on their travels, they are put into contact with a sister act, and from there, our two leads find love in a remote Vermont inn that just so happens to be owned by their old general from their war days. Meanwhile, Home Alone follows the story of Kevin McAllister, who was mistakenly left behind while his family head off to France for the holidays. With his family gone, Kevin realizes it's up to him to protect the house from the wet bandits who intend to rob the street blind. Now, while White Christmas has an unforgettable charm, Home Alone has a modern story with an adorable main character and a predicament that brings heart and adventure to each Christmas season. Though I don't want to undersell the moment where the general in White Christmas is reunited with his troops, or the amazing songs that White Christmas brings, I'm gonna have to give this one to Home Alone. Our next pairing is Elf versus Fred Claus. If you've seen my review of Fred Claus, you already know that I'm a fan. Vince Vaughn plays Santa's cynical big brother and learns to inhabit the Christmas spirit with an all-star cast in tow. In Elf, we follow Will Ferrell as a human who has been raised as one of Santa's actual elves, who learns the truth and comes to New York City to reconnect with his long-lost father. Now, while both of these stories gives us a fun twist on people raised in the North Pole and their familial connections, there's no denying Will Ferrell's innocence as Buddy the Elf. Though Fred is a fun character who earns his Christmas stripes, Buddy fills all the Christmas gaps with lighthearted comedy from a big-name actor. I'm gonna have to give this one to Elf. Next, we have It's a Wonderful Life versus Christmas with the Cranks. For a lot of you, this probably feels easy one way or the other. You're either solidly Team Wonderful Life or solidly Team Cranks. For me, though, this is an incredibly hard one. There's no denying the classic appeal of It's a Wonderful Life. Following George Bailey through his journey is one of the highlights of my year. But Tim Allen may absolutely be the king of Christmas, and his chemistry with Jamie Lee Curtis is out of this world. Christmas with the Cranks is more fun and sweet than it has any right to be. But honestly, when it comes down to it, It's a Wonderful Life is just a better movie. So there's no denying it. For this one, It's a Wonderful Life. And finally, moving on to our last pair in our family movies category, we've got A Christmas Story versus Home Alone 2. Now, Home Alone 2 is the first and only sequel we've included on this whole list. It's one of the rare sequels that lives up to the original. The problem here is that I absolutely hate A Christmas Story. I don't hate the overall story, but boy is Ralphie a whiny little douche, and his brother just piles it on. I just can't stand any of these kids. Now, my uncle recently told me that Peter Billingsley recently revealed that in one scene, they actually gave him chewing tobacco and he ended up getting sick. Now, I don't wish any ill will on anyone, but I also don't feel bad about little Ralphie getting sick. Believe me, this movie has some amazing moments, and a lot of it deserves recognition. From the tongue on the pole scene to the leg lamp, but all in all, there's no way it beats Home Alone 2 for me. Now, moving on to our animated division, our first contenders are How the Grinch Stole Christmas versus Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. As I said in my last video, I just hate these Christmas claymation movies. The animation style was amazing for its time, and it gave us a lot of memorable characters, but unfortunately, those characters were insufferable, to the point where the Grinch was absolutely welcome. There's not a lot that warms your heart like seeing the Grinch come to terms with Christmas. So, for many reasons, including Boris Karloff singing the Grinch theme song, the Grinch is just a winner. Next, we've got Adam Sandler's 8 Crazy Nights versus The Polar Express. Many of you may already agree with me that The Polar Express is 100% creepy. At the time, Bob Zemeckis wanted to pioneer motion capture technology, and while he deserves the accolade, he also deserves the negative stigma that comes with the creepiness of the uncanny valley that he created with The Polar Express. Even Tom Hanks's charm couldn't help him. Meanwhile, Adam Sandler created a genuinely heartfelt and sweet musical holiday comedy that is more often than not overlooked. For so many reasons, 8 Crazy Nights just beats the monstrosity that is The Polar Express. Up next, we have The Nightmare Before Christmas versus Arthur Christmas. Now, this one is moderately hard to judge because both are genuinely good movies from a technical aspect. While Nightmare tackles a world focused on Halloween dealing with Christmas, Arthur Christmas tells a heartfelt story of Santa's children and grandchildren trying to make sure that Christmas goes off without a hitch. Simply for the focus on Christmas, though, I'm gonna have to give this one to Arthur Christmas. Now, that one may be a hard one for a lot of people to swallow, but I urge you to consider the fact that Nightmare Before Christmas is solidly probably a Halloween movie more than a Christmas movie. And finally, we're left with Claus versus Charlie Brown Christmas. Now, Charlie Brown Christmas has some major Christmas classics like the Peanuts Christmas song or Linus's speech, but Claus is just a bottom-to-top better movie. So if you haven't seen it, get a Netflix subscription and learn a new Santa origin story because Claus is a clear winner here. Next, we're moving on to the first division in our South Pole Conference. We'll take a look at kids' movies first, and as I've said, these movies are aimed more towards children than adults. So, even though some of them may also fit into the family movie category, I chose ones that I thought were more angled towards children. Our first pair is The Santa Claus versus Unaccompanied Minors. Now, I'll start by saying I really enjoyed Unaccompanied Minors. Directed by Paul Feig, I think that this one had some great strides. And I love any movie that has some semblance of an ensemble cast, and this one was fun. But let's not kid ourselves. Tim Allen in The Santa Claus is just always going to be the clear winner here, and we'll touch more on that in the next round. Next, we've got Ron Howard's live-action version of The Grinch versus The Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, Grinch is the first movie we have in this bracket that is a remake or anything like that to another on a different part of this bracket. Now, The Grinch is an absolute tour de force from Jim Carrey, and this may actually be the role that he was born to play. Meanwhile, The Muppet Christmas Carol is for many people the quintessential version of the story. And while the Muppets have made a movie that is perfectly enjoyable each Christmas season, it's hard to go up against Jim Carrey's Grinch. Up next, we've got Arnold Schwarzenegger's Jingle All the Way versus the original Miracle on 34th Street. Now this one was especially hard for me. I grew up in the exact window that Jingle All the Way should have affected me. And believe me, it did. This is one of my all-time favorite Christmas films. But recently I had a chance to re-watch the original Miracle on 34th Street, and believe me, there's something magical there. Seeing Edmund Gwynn as Santa Claus honestly makes you believe in Santa again. And it's worth a revisit. So for that reason, Miracle on 34th Street is the winner here. And finally, we've got Jack Frost versus To Grandmother's House We Go. Believe it or not, this one is relatively easy for me. While the Olsen twins were truly sweet in To Grandmother's House We Go, Michael Keaton is my dude. I honestly have a hard time rooting against him in any situation, and if we're putting him even as a snowman up against the Olsen twins, there's no contest. Jack Frost, clear winner here. Finally, in our last division in the South Pole Conference, we're taking a look at the Christmas movies aimed at adults. Our first opponents are Scrooged versus The Family Man. In The Family Man, we follow Nicolas Cage as he takes a look at what his life would look like if he'd made some different choices. In Scrooged, we get a version of A Christmas Carol starring Bill Murray and Karen Allen. I'm sorry, but I don't even feel like I need to say any more here. It's A Christmas Carol starring Bill Murray. End of story. Scrooge is a solid winner here. In our next pairing, we're looking at the often overlooked Mixed Nuts versus the often over-applauded Bad Santa. I've probably already given it away, but Christ, do I hate Bad Santa. This movie had so many people involved that should have done better, but instead, they put together a gross-out, vulgar comedy that should have been just, in general, better than it was. We'll discuss it more in the next round, but Mixed Nuts is the clear winner for me here. If you haven't seen it now, please go watch it and then prepare for the next video. Up next, we're looking at National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation versus The Night Before. I honestly enjoyed both of these movies, and if I'm being truly honest, I think I have more laughs from The Night Before. If you haven't yet, go check out my review on that movie. The problem, however, is that I think that Christmas Vacation is an absolute classic. There's so many quotable moments, and Chevy Chase totally hits every mark in this film. So, as hard as it is, I honestly have to give this one to Christmas Vacation. And believe me, I love The Night Before, so this is a rough one. And for the last match in this series, we're looking at Love Actually versus Four Christmases. If you follow my channel up to this point, you may know that I love Vince Vaughn. Also, I love a solid romantic, lighthearted comedy. So this pairing may be hard for most people to decide, and it definitely was a little hard for me. Unfortunately, based on the cheese factor alone, I'm gonna have to eliminate Love Actually. Four Christmases hit the comedy note that I prefer in the long run. Well, there we have it, folks. We are now through the very first round of the Real Raider Realist Reel Showdown. We have 16 movies bashing it out to see who will be crowned King of Christmas. So, let me know. Do you hate my choices? Did I line up with your opinions? Please, let me know in the comments, and tune in soon to see who makes it through to the next round. I think we're all going to be at least a little bit surprised. Thanks.